You're listening to Two Guys Talking Wine with Michael Pinkus and Andre Prue.
Hello, Michael.
Andre, what's going on?
In that whole realm of us saying that we're going to get our crap together this year, be more professional and more organized, and get better guests, we are doing just that.
Are we?
Yes, we are joined by Paul Kay. He is the owner of the original Wine of the Month Club. He's tasted over 100,000 wines, which I think you've probably tasted. Yeah, you've probably tasted that many wines. I don't think I've tasted quite that many wines in my career yet. But you are also the host of Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. How did I do on the last name?
Paul K. The rest is silent.
Okay, we'll do the rest silent.
That.
You've been kind enough to have us on your podcast twice now, and we haven't had you formally on ours. I think we just stole the feed of our interview from you. Yeah, we stole it. Yep. And did that lazily. But we thought it'd be interesting to talk to someone who you sell a lot of wine, right?
We do actually sell. But I've been tapping my foot ever since the first podcast when you said I'm going to have you. When you said you would have me on, so. Well,
I was letting Michael take care of that, and
3 years of foot tapping.
Oh, I didn't know it was my responsibility.
You're the one who set this up. You're the one who set this up.
I was usually local guests. I thought you were international guests. I guess I have to take over the international clientele too now.
One thing I thought it'd be interesting to dive into, because I know on our podcast we've been diving a little bit more into the marketing side of how things work. And, Mike and I have been very critical and lamenting quite a bit. If you want to listen to some of the episodes that have really gotten us fired up, if you're new to this podcast, listen to us talk about wine scoring. Mm-hmm. I started scoring wines, I guess, nearly a decade ago, and that came kicking and screaming after I was doing a weekly wine segment on a local talk radio station. An agent started asking for scores because our monopoly, they actually ask for scores to put wines on the shelves, and frankly, it just makes things easier to sell wines. And I use a star system. Michael uses a star system. 3.5 is a good wine. 4 is a great wine. 4 and up to 5. And I think in my entire career, I've given out maybe a half dozen 5-star scores, maybe 10 max.
I also went kicking and screaming into the scoring range. I didn't want to get into. I didn't think wine was an essay, so I didn't think you should be giving it like anything that's got numbers in it. That's why stars, right? So it's good. It's very good. It's excellent. It's outstanding. That's what the star system means to me. It doesn't translate.
And you were bad at math anyway, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah. It's gonna change. Within a year, 2 years anyway. So whatever I give it today is not going to matter. Whatever. You're just hoping it translates into how long it's going to live in the bottle, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, for one. 2, yes, I have tasted over 100,000 wines. And that's only because 32 years ago, every Tuesday, my dad said, hey, you're going to taste wines on Tuesday. That's when I did it at the wine shop, so you do it. And, we average 50 to 75 people a day that come in every Tuesday. I've never missed a Tuesday unless I was sick or out of town. And even then, I was tasting wine. And all of a sudden, I look back 32 years later, oh, my goodness. It's been 100,000 wines, and we've sold well over 20 million bottles of wine.
Well, nice.
So in the way it started, actually, my father and I went to a tasting together after I worked for him for a few months. When it was a Bordeaux tasting, 25 wines, we got separated. So we were in different rooms. And our scoring system at the time, and still is, my vendors don't know this because they would look over my shoulder when I make my notes. 1, can't use it overpriced, unpalatable. 2, can use it at the price that they've offered it for. We think it's good value. And 3 was probably taste better if the price came down. So, and so we were off only by 2 in this one Bordeaux tasting that we had scored differently. So he goes, I think you're ready to take this on. And we've used that same system ever since. But here's the difference. And I just had this conversation with James Suckling recently at a tasting. And he wants to come on the show and defend his scoring system.
Oh, I want to hear that.
Me too.
I know what his scoring system is. It starts at 90. That's got to be what it is. It doesn't.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. But
I don't know why people don't. If that's what they're doing, then I'm fine with that. As long as people come out and tell you that. Don't tell me you're on a 100-point system, but you never give a score an 89, which is still a good score.
Right. It's exactly right. I was just going to say it's really a 20-point system across the board, right? Because no one's going to talk about their 81.
No.
Right? Who's going to talk about it? I mean, I'm sure they give something out, but...
Well, I even still remember great wine writer Gord Stimmel. And I still
in Ontario.
In Ontario. He was the wine writer for the Toronto Star, which is one of Canada's great newspapers. Like, I'd say on...
Not for wine lately, but you know.
But
anyway.
I mean, reputationally, sort of. I guess I'd say it's the equivalent of like Canada's New York Times. He published a profile of a local winery that's mucking around with the Passamento wines, and there was a wine that you and I had both scored 4 stars. David Larson of Wineline, another well-known wine critic, had scored it 90 points, and he went into the Toronto Star and published it as an 85. And the thing is, his write-up was actually decent, but it was almost like he was making a statement by publishing an 85-point score. And I think that's the last time we've probably seen an 85-point score published in the Toronto Star.
He didn't like the style. He didn't like the Passamento in Ontario. He was against it, so he came out against it.
What were they making the Passamento wines with up there?
Board varieties.
Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot.
Yeah, I think he was warning us.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
That'd be a pretty wild animal to taste that.
I think it's interesting.
But I mean, here in Ontario, the problem is that our liquor board, just to fill Paul in a little bit here, goes out and looks for the highest score. So it promotes the highest score in their little vintages magazine that comes out every 2 weeks. And the newest one is this guy from Italy, Luca Moroni, who has tasted more wines that have scored 99 than I've ever tasted in my life. And half the time I'm wondering what's the one thing that they're missing that makes him give them a 99. And the other side of me goes, you're full of, you know.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for pulling it back.
So, I mean, you think it's a necessary evil? Because the way we... Go ahead.
I was actually going to flip. I think you're going to ask the question to us that I want to ask you, though, because you sell a lot of wine through,
let him ask
your business, though. But let me ask you, though, how important is it, or was it... Okay, this is going to be a two-part question. Was it ever important scores were...
Stop, Andre, stop!
No.
I want Paul to ask his question first.
Because it's $5.
You write yours down. If he doesn't
$5.
ask it, he's the guest. Let him ask this. I'm interested.
Okay, fine. I'll behave.
Well, flip it around.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a necessary evil because the consumer doesn't know any better. And we had that conversation last time, which is, do they really understand? But here's the problem I have. The other day I tasted, and I use this example all the time, a Listron Negro from the Canary Islands. And I'd never had that wine. I freaked over it. I thought it was fabulous, volcanic, the whole thing. And it had 95 points. All right, so if I'm a point buyer and I walk into the wine shop and there's a Cabernet from Napa that's 95 points, these are two wines that are diametrically opposed to each other. They have nothing to do with each other except that they're maybe similar in color, but not really. So I'm going to be disappointed in one of these. Unless I've got a really educated palate, I'm going to say, wow, this is really great from Napa, but I don't know, what is this Liston Negro thing? I can't drink it, or vice versa. So is that a fair presentation for the consumer to see the points and just judge on the points?
Well, how do we get consumers to think about more than just points, though, right? Because the pyramid of like consumers, the number of consumers who are just go into the shop and look to grab something and are looking for a special occasion wine are going to probably grab the first thing that's 95 points. We'll probably completely gloss over the Canary Island wine because they're just like, I've never heard of the Canary Islands. I'm going to go straight to Napa Valley and grab that because I know it. I've heard of it. I'm familiar with it. It's been on TV.
On the other hand, it may come down to price, right? I don't know how much Canary Island wine is versus the Napa. Napa, I would assume, would be very expensive, although I don't know how much Canary wine is.
That's an important piece of information that has to be included in the ratings, and it's not. And it is here because that's how I sell my wines. I have $13 wines, $20 wines, $30, whatever. My rating, which I have tons of, nothing gets into my club unless it's got a rating of 95 by me or 94 or something by me only.
Wow. Okay.
My rating is different. My rating is, of all the $20 Sauvignon Blancs, this is the one that's worth the best value. This is 94 points. This one's 80 points, whatever it is. But that's the $20 Sauvignon Blancs, or the $15 red blends, or the $50 Cabernets from Napa. Amongst its peers, this is the best value. So if you come to my shop and you go, oh, yeah, I want a Napa Cab, here are the ones I think were the best representation of what they're supposed to be. That's the most important part, I think. And I get complaints. You rated this wine 95, and I saw that, the Spectator gave it a 2. And I'm like, well, That's the difference. There's a difference between the way the spectator looks at it and I do.
Yeah.
And of course, we're all going to go to the point where, well, just check the spectator's ads and see which one's got the biggest page, and we'll find out who's got the best scores. That's always been, of course, the problem with most periodicals, unlike Robert Parker. But you had asked a very important question. The answer is probably not very black and white, and is how do we get the consumer to understand that there's this value in a glass of wine beyond the points? And I think for the consumer, they have at least some kind of comfort level that somebody has tasted this wine and they're not going to get ripped off because it's such an emotional decision. Wine is an emotional decision. It's not like buying a widget where you get on Amazon and find the cheapest person that makes the cheapest widget. You look for the stuff that's going to make you feel the best. And I really think that comes from the story, from telling authentic stories. Martha Stewart Chardonnay is not an authentic story. Snoop Dogg's Cali Red's not an authentic story. But if you could
Snoop doesn't drink a lot of wine?
I don't know, but he sells a ton.
Which I still don't get. I still don't understand why Snoop hasn't just made like a canned gin and juice. Like, you would not be able to keep that on the shelf.
That's a really great point. I don't know.
Anyways,
we haven't talked about canned cocktails yet because that's another big burgeoning market. But I just think that consumers, if they understood the stories, they'll have that aha moment. They'll start realizing that really there's history in wine, and the historical value of a glass of wine is everything about that glass. If you knew, what the Germans did in France during the war and how they pillaged cellars and how those winemakers went through hell to keep their cellars working, and phosphorus-loaded cannon shells landing in Champagne have destroyed vineyards that they still can't grow on. That is history that you don't taste necessarily in the bottle, but it has to be influenced by the people that are making it. And I think
there's some great books written about that, and you read Judgment of Paris, and
but you've talked
French
about
War on Wines and things like that.
You've talked about
great books.
You've talked about selling the story as well, though. I mean, that's the fun thing about being a wine personality is we care enough about this that we've got microphones and hopefully have an audience, and it's not just my mom listening to this, but also, we're sharing our own stories of our own adventures. And the other thing too, it's really important when you cultivate an audience and you get yourself in a position of selling millions of bottles of wine, or Michael and I having chosen to write about this and not sell millions of bottles of wine that we know of, but that we
which I've done your route actually.
but we build trust. That you build trust with an audience. The thing is, knowing your rating system and you explaining your rating system to me, Paul, I know that if I subscribe to your wine club, that when I see the scoring system, it's going to be consistent and I can trust you. I know that was sort of just a little bit of a, I guess in terms of like building that trust. So have you found that your scores have been dipping up? You've been doing this for a while. If you audited your scores from 10 years ago, are your scores higher than they were, or have they stayed the same? And do you feel pressure to go higher, because you have people like James Suckling to compete with?
It's a really good question, and I'm so proud of the answer because it doesn't really matter. I'm still rating them. I'm really rating them against themselves. So, but the question is really, have things gone up or down? In general, for what you've been tasting, I can tell you that the way wine is bought and sold in America today has created some pretty inferior stuff. And I taste a lot more crap today than I did before. And we have to be very careful about stuff that's brought to us because we were talking about celebrity-based wines. We were talking about baseball wines. The stuff is not that good because and I'm not going to say that bulk wine is not good because so much of wine in America, maybe 90% of wine is not bottled by the people that grow it. So that's just an important fact to know. So if you want to call that bulk wine or shiners or white labels or, private labels, that's okay. It doesn't matter. There are some very good wines that are made that way. But when you're bringing stuff in from Europe at 50 cents a liter and putting it under fancy labels and trying to sell it to the public, and I don't know if you've seen those in Canada, you start to create a bad image in people's minds, and they only get burned once or twice. Well, let me tell you a story. We're talking about something here. I had a drinks.com, not drinks.com, the punchdrink.com. She came in, wine writer, sat with me for 4 hours tasting wine on Tuesday. And in between vendors, I opened a case of wine from one of my competitors who was sending me wine for us to sample. And I didn't look at the label. And I know you guys love Beaujolais. Okay. So this was a 2019 Beaujolais. This was around 2020. So it was current vintage. And it was horrible. It was a Village. It was horrible. And she goes, "This is terrible." I said, "Yeah." And I didn't realize what it was, but I rolled it over, and it was Saturday Night. I can't even say this. Saturday Night Live, Beaujolais.
What?
What a weird
Yes.
brand partnership.
Saturday Night Live, Beaujolais. So now I'm thinking this poor person who watches Saturday Night Live, whatever they used it for, and he goes, "I'm going to buy this, and maybe we'll watch the show together," and then it's terrible.
Now you got to remember Saturday Night Live's on at 11:30 at night. It is on Saturday, and so by then you're probably at least a bottle or two in, and you always pour your worst bottle as
That's
the
true.
third bottle of the night, right?
That's
so,
Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
there you go. It doesn't matter what you pour, as long as you just try to get the people out of the house, right?
I know.
There was a brand at one time called First, Second, and Third Bottle. It was the same winery, and the wines got not as good as you went down the line. And that was the whole premise of what you just said. Drink this one first, and the second one's not as quite as good, and the third one you don't care.
Yeah, exactly. So it's Saturday Night Live wine. Makes sense to me now.
So James Suckling, when I was talking to him, I said, I want you to come on the show, and I want you to talk about the point system. He goes, yeah, we have a very peculiar one. I have 6 people tasting for me now, and we're on the same page. We're averaging 20,000 bottles a year or something. I forgot the number. But I said, no, I think we need to talk about this. I think we need to tell the listeners what it means when a Suckling rating comes out and how you guys arrive at that, particularly when there's more than one person doing it.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's. I mean, that let me lets me segue to sort of the next question. One of the things that Michael and I have really been lamenting, and kind of curious about, because I'm cautiously optimistic. I love what's happening on Instagram for the most part, because it's giving people the ability to connect with very little wine knowledge and share it with other people and share their enthusiasm for wine. And hopefully when you find people who have a little bit of that journalistic muscle, whether they know it or not, you get to follow their journey and learn with them. The woman that I do my radio show with is one of those people. And the reason I do the radio show with her is because she's got that journalistic instinct. But trust with an audience is so... I'm skeptical of everything. In Canada, influencers don't need to disclose when they're paid, which is hugely problematic, because you can follow someone that you think their content is genuine, they pick up 10,000 followers, and all of a sudden the type of content changes, and you don't know whether or not they're doing it because they genuinely like the product or they're being paid. I guess it's a long-winded way of me saying is it just like, does the next generation of wine writers have the ability to build that trust with their audience? And are things different in the States where we're seeing a wine journalism group of people that can maintain that trust with their audience?
In that wine is such a unique product. It's totally different than anything else. I think all this influencer stuff's going to implode, and I'll tell you why I think that. I've interviewed a lot of them. And some are very brilliant, some are very good, some are just really stupid. The whole concept. It's like, how do you become an influencer, and what does that mean to me? They trade, exposure for wine or whatever they get from me. I never pay them anything. They're lucky. I frankly feel they're lucky to be on the show because they're getting more exposure than I'm getting. But if you look really close at those numbers, and I just learned this recently by watching my own viral videos, which I'll tell you what they are. 99% of the people, maybe half of them anyway, don't even apply. They're like in Lithuania or Russia or India, or they're not even. They may be following you, but they have nothing to do with the wine trade. They don't really care. You're not going to sell anything to these people. And I learned this because I posted a video on my TikTok and on Instagram, and it's the simplest thing you've ever seen. It's a very good friend of mine, Don Schliff, opening a bottle of port with the traditional heated tongs.
Cool video. That content is like made for that platform. That's beautiful. Yeah. I want to see it.
So no music. You may hear James Suckling cackling in the background, and it's like 40 seconds. It's gotten 4.5 million views on TikTok with 150,000 likes, and it's gotten 1.5 million views on Instagram and 18,000 likes. You think I didn't sell anything? I didn't sell a single bottle from that. Okay, fine. That's okay. I didn't do it for that. But I was watching that. I think so-and-so liked you. So-and-so liked it. Some of it's written in Arabic. a lot of it's written in Russian. And I'm like thinking to myself, wow, these influencers really, we don't know. We don't know where they're from and where they've been and what they're doing.
Okay, but this is the thing where I say I'm cautiously optimistic is the good influencers will put their cards down in front of you. There's a few in Ontario where I've spoken to them because I work in marketing at my day job. A good influencer, if you want to do business with them, you will be like, influencer, I've got 50 cases of Snoop's wine that I would like to sell and I want it to be in the market. Can you share your analytics with me? Show me your audience, show me where they are, show me when they engage. If they are hesitant to do that, they don't give a crap about what it is they're doing. A good influencer will be like, here's my rate card, here's the demographics. My audience is women aged 18 to 34. They are located in North America with 20% in Europe and 10% in Russia. Like, they will be able to give you the breakdown. The good influencers are the ones who treat it like a business and do it as such. But that being said, influencers are not journalists, and that's the problem that I have, is where that line is blurred. Influencers play a very important role in marketing and moving product. As long as you, as the person with the product to move, does your due diligence to make sure you're hiring a good influencer. But is lifestyle content just dead? Is wine rating dead? Like, should we all just pack it in and give up? Like, should Michael and I just give up?
No, the influencers I've done that are been interesting, that have reached the most audience when I've posted podcasts, that have the most to say to me when I talk to them, have an objective in life. They have an opinion in life of wine, whether people of color or women in wine or natural, whatever the subjects we're just talking about. If they have a true opinion and they know how to write, which is kind of rare these days, those are the people that people are listening to. The other people will just fade away. If you're going to the market and buying stuff off the shelf and showing labels on Instagram and saying, I love this is worthless. No one's going to pay attention to that. Eventually you're going to lose that audience because no one's going to care. But when you stimulate somebody's thought process and you inspire them, people want to be educated, they want to be entertained, and they want to be inspired.
That's why your Tong video
can do that.
That's why your Tong video performed so well. Like,
what do you have as far as wine journalism down in California? I guess let's start there. Like, we have a monopoly system, and they are slowly but surely choking off wine journalism here in Ontario by not allowing wine writers to access the products anymore like they used to.
Really?
But James Suckling is very prominently displayed on the shelves of the LCBO because you need to submit scores to get a listing. But you
and Luca Moroni, he's all over Italy. Like, it's just unbelievable. I've never seen a score lower than 95, and I've seen tons by 99. But what do you have as far as journalism down there?
It's a wide open book. It's whatever you want it to be. I had a guy in here that wrote a book. Anybody can write a book on wine if you're intelligent. This guy wrote a book. It's the 52 Weeks of Wine, and he recommends a particular bottle of wine and what it should go with. He's very crass. His language is pretty rough. He's a Master of Wine candidate. He just wrote a book. It's actually a fabulous story what he's done. The guy that writes my newsletter for me, he's, I think, one of the most creative wine writers around. His career didn't go where it could have gone for whatever reason. I communicate with Dan Berger regularly. When my father, this patch I'm wearing on my jacket from Les Amis Devant, which is an old wine enthusiast group from the U.S., used to be 100 chapters or more. Incredible thing. And I think I'm going back to this. I actually resurrected the brand and I trademarked it. They used to have dinners, and Nathan Croman would show up in the LA Times, and Dan Berger would show up, and Robert Mondavi would come down from Napa to speak to groups, and that was where you got that handshake and you got that personal experience of wine. It has to be that, and I think the good journalists are the ones that can create that trust, write to the people that as far as writing their style, to tell the stories, to inspire one to try something new. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was in the market the other day with my social networker. A woman came up. She was looking at the wall. I said, what are you looking for? She said, I want to buy something other than what I usually buy. I go, what do you usually buy? She said, J. Lohr. I said, okay. I go, here's a few wines. I'm in the trade. Here's a few wines in the same price range. That would be something different, but might stimulate your palate. She walked away. So I told her, and she came back. And we talked some more, and we realized we knew each other from Little League. Still didn't buy anything that I recommended. And I thought to myself, what an interesting thing. She knows I'm in the business, and she didn't choose anything. she was looking for that shelf talker that may have had a set of points on it. She didn't care that I was telling her or not. So I think it's an important thing.
Totally.
And it's important to look at it for people to at least feel like there's some comfort level. And if you find James Suckling's wine really, attuned to your palate, then that's what you follow, and that's what it comes down to. But he told me at this tasting that his fellowship is that what it is, went through the roof during the pandemic, as did sales for wine in America, but
Canada too.
It was interesting to hear that fellowship, of his, membership to his newsletter had gone through the roof.
Yeah, I you know what? I remember going on a tour of Australia, and I ended up going into one of the wineries, and I was looking at their menu, and they had all James Suckling's, all his scores, 95, 96, 17. And I happily got to sit with the winemaker and taste, and I was like, "So what do you think of all of this Suckling stuff?" And she goes, "I think he's full of but it sells wine." That's a quote. And I really appreciated that, because that's a winemaker that doesn't buy into the hype. She realizes that, he's trying to sell his stickers and his scores. She's trying to sell wine, and if he can help her sell wine, absolutely fantastic. She doesn't believe anything that he's saying here. Maybe his tasting note is correct, but she thinks his scoring's out of whack. But, and she's willing to admit that, which I thought was great, because I have been to other wineries, and you go, you'll see 96, and they go, "I think his score is too low." And you're like, "I think he's too high."
But I mean, that's it though. The tastes are subjective. I think that's why I asked the questions the way I asked them, because like Paul, you said that your wines are like 94, 95 points, which is something that Michael and I would still think are pretty high in terms of the scores, but you've built up an audience, you've built up a wine club, you've built up trust, and then you've built up consistency with your audience. And it's just like, my question isn't about the scores, because it's clear that, like you said, that it's sort of irrelevant at this point. It's about building the trust with the audience. And I guess, I don't know, it's a thing where I guess people just don't care about us scoring wines at 4 stars when other people can score them 95, 96 points. And is this something where maybe, Michael, you and I need to think about adapting?
I really don't know where to go myself on that. But Paul, I do have a question for you. You say you taste, what, about 50 wines every Tuesday? Is that correct?
At least, yeah.
Okay. So let's say you've got, just for, S's and giggles here, let's just say that you got a table full of Sauvignon Blanc. You got 50 Sauvignon Blanc in front of you. Are you looking for a 95 wine, or does the 95 wine have to, that has to speak to you? Like, are you hoping to get something out of that table of wine, and you've got to buy something off of that? Or are you you could get rid of all 50 and not have one on your menu?
No, I can go a whole day, score everything a 1.
Okay. All right.
That's happened before. I mean, it's got to stand on its own.
Okay.
It has to stand on its own for what it is. There's a lot of wines that come, they're pretty good, but they're just red wine or white wine. They don't really speak to the terroir or the grape. And that's the main objective. Like, if I send you a Sonoma cab, this is going to be a pretty good representation of Sonoma, say Alexander Valley, then it's the one next to it for the price. And that's what the score means. It's not like a relative score that you'd see on a shelf talker. It's relative amongst the wines I've tasted to them. But here's a thought that I give some only the intellectual podcast guests and or people I speak with.
I'm going to fail this test.
That makes you intellectual.
Andre's not very good at tests.
I get great answers. I have to frame this question properly so that the answer is not dealing with things. But if there was no profit, and let me put it this way: when Burgundy was appellating itself in the 1920s, they were adding an appellation. One of the vendors said, we should not allow ourselves to advertise. Like, put it in the code, put it in the appellation code. You can't advertise, because we make good wine. They're going to come to us to drink it. All right. So you take that thought a little further. What if profit was nothing to do with wine? What if we didn't have to make a profit? What if we made the best we could make in the vineyard that we could put on the shelf for people to take? What if it was not important to be profitable? Would we have a different industry? Would there be rankings? Would there be scores?
That's a very good question.
It's a tough one.
Yes,
I mean, because it's the thing
Yes.
where like on the surface, as like when you, I think you reach like a level of wine love where you look at these appellation systems like the Grand Cru and Premier Grand Cru, and you just think, okay, these were the French people. They were surely just trying to celebrate the best and most consistent regions, and you take a step back and it's just like, even then in 1860s when that first ranking was done, though, follow the money. Like there was money involved in that, and there was money that was there. And it's not saying
what he's saying, Andre, is that there was no money, would there be scores?
I know, but I'm just it's, I don't know how we can answer that because it's so intertwined in the business.
We're humans. Of course there's scores. There's always going to be scores. We're always going to rank something. As human beings, we want to give things labels, which is why we taste wine and we give and we talk about it. Instead of just saying it's red wine, we say it's got cherry and blackberry and chocolate and licorice. We've got to give it a label. We have to. We can't just say it's red wine. We have to describe it. And then and then at some point you're going to rank them. You're going to taste 4, 5, 6, 50, 100, and you're going to go, no, this one's the best I've ever had. And whether it's going to be a score or a list of the top 100 you've ever tasted, it wouldn't matter. If there was no profit, it doesn't matter. You're still going to rank it. Because you know what? We probably all have a list of our favorite meals that we've ever had in our lifetime. There's no money in that for you, but you've probably got them listed in your head. Oh, you know what? That burger at that one place was the best burger I ever had. And you can go, my top 3 burgers in my life were blah, blah, blah. You know where I had the best French fries? Blah, blah, blah. Same thing with wine. These would be my best wines. We may not say this is the 100-point wine. That may never have come to that. But there is always going to be a ranking of some sort because we're human beings and we have got to tell somebody that we liked something better than something else.
Did Michael get the right answer?
Well, no, there's no answer. I suppose that's accurate. And I was thinking about what you just said because we went to dinner in Yountville and we went to, I'm not going to say what it is because it's not fair.
No, say it.
It was fun. It was a French restaurant. It was fun. We had a good time. But
wait, was it the French restaurant?
No.
Okay, I'm okay with it then.
We've been there a couple times. But the meat, it was prepared right, but you could tell that the meat was inferior meat, right? And then the next night we went to Bottega, which I will say the name, and the same meat. It was the same dish. It was incredible. And it was just the quality of the beef. And okay, this guy over here is buying less quality because he's paying less because he wants to make more money, and it didn't taste as good. It was obvious it was the structure of the meat, not the dish. And this other guy is like willing to put up a little more money to get better meat to taste better. So I think that if wine had not been profit, there's no profit in wine, you would try to make the best expression of where it comes from and what's in it, what the grape is and what you're able to get out of the vineyard, which is most winemakers, that's what they try to do, but they're bound by all the problems, all the issues and money being brought from them. So then if that happened and you went to the shelf and you're getting pure representation of what it is, then you're going to rank it at that point. I agree with Michael on this. You're going to rank at that point because we're going to have different palates, but at least it's on a level playing field of quality. Like this is the best value that's the best wine that came from the Charme Saint-Martin or whatever. So there's no correct answer. I just wondered how the industry would be different, and would we get better wines? And I think that would be the case.
I wish it would be different, but I would tell you this: it would sooner, even in your utopian world, sooner or later, it would evolve into what it is now. Do you know what I mean? Everybody would start by doing the great things that they're doing, and then some guy would figure out a way to just cut a corner a little bit.
So
to make himself a little bit more money to use inferior meat.
You're right. Okay, now,
and next thing you know, he's selling his wine at $20, and the other guys.
Okay, so now as we're getting to the point where I think it's time to start wrapping things up, I think this is the key fundamental difference between Michael and I. Although it hurts when I agree with Michael in this case, it's just like I'd like to believe that there's a world where it's a little more optimistic and that the drive behind making wine is making great wine for great wine's sake and not to make $1. But I hate that Michael is correct. Paul, how can people find you And I really need you to throw out your social media handles because I really want to see that video of someone opening a bottle of port with the hot tongs.
It's well, first of all, the podcast is Wine Talks with Paul K. It's available on all podcast platforms. It's also at winetalkspodcast.com, where they're all there. And I have crazy guests like you do. I mean, like crazy people like Kevin O'Leary, who's
Mr. Wonderful and from Ontario. We haven't had him on the podcast before, but I've interviewed him. Michael, have you interviewed him?
I actually inventoried his wine cellar.
Oh, there we go.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
All this, because he's a Confrérie Chevalier type of guy, And so I will tell you this before we get off. I offered him a case of Grand Cru Burgundy to post my podcast on his social, and he didn't do it.
Oh, wow.
Really?
The Wine of the Month Club on TikTok, Wine of the Month on Twitter, Wine of the Month Club on Instagram.
I'm looking forward to seeing that, and unfortunately, because of our 43rd parallel border, we can't subscribe to your Wine of the Month Club, the original Wine of the Month Club.
Paul, do you have a shop as well, or is it just all online?
No, we have a great shop here, and we actually have tastings here. We have tasting room.
All right, let's give a shout out to that.
We've got to do a trip.
Let's do a road trip down to your shop. Where is the shop located?
It's in
Where's that located?
Pasadena. The Rose Bowl and the Rose Parade. We're just a mile or two down the road from there.
Right on.
All right.
Well, and
wait a minute, we're even closer to the Santa Anita racetrack, which I know you guys are horse buff. So
are we?
Are we? No.
You parlay.
I'm Andre Prue from AndreWineReview.ca, at AndreWineReview on social media, patreon.com/2guystalkingwine. Check the show notes, which is something I've learned from my time at Canada Land to get people to actually help pay to keep this podcast on the air. We appreciate the support.
I'm Michael Pinkus of MichaelPinkusWineReview.com. You can find me on social media as The Great Guy, sometimes as Michael Pinkus Wine Review, and sometimes as Michael Pinkus. I haven't
you haven't consolidated. Make sure you subscribe to Wine Talks with Paul K so you can listen to our episode with him. We had as much fun there as I'm hoping he did with us. I mean, he's said he's going to have us back, and Paul, we're definitely going to have you back because I learned a bunch of stuff. I think we got deeper into the philosophy of scoring than I thought. Anyways, Michael, take us away.
Love it.
Well, it is dark outside, so it's only fair to say good night.
C'est ça. Au revoir.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to Two Guys Talking Wine on iTunes.
Two Guys Talking Wine is produced by Jim Ray, Adam Duran, and Ken Little.